this is a very interesting time in America. I know a few of you aren't in America, but almost everybody else is. And it's really rare that I don't meet with some people and the issue of politics, or at least people's emotional reactions to what is going on in politics right now, isn't among the very first topics of conversation. And I don't really want to talk about politics, but I do want to talk about how we can be with strong emotions and not be overwhelmed by them. People come to me who have been longtime meditators, and they are anxious, they're frustrated, they're angry, they're depressed about what is going on in our country right now. And once again, I'm not going to get into the rights and wrongs, the do's and don'ts of what's happening politically, but I really would like to talk about how we can work with strong emotions and use them for fuel for awakening. I also want to be very careful to tread this fine line here that we're not using spiritual practices. We're not going to spiritually bypass our emotions in the sense of saying, I'm going to be spiritual. I'm not going to be upset. I'm not going to do something about what's bothering me. But I deeply, deeply believe that can we act from the heart, from the spiritual heart, from the deep heart, that it's much more likely that our actions will be effective. So I'm not talking about spirituality in place of action, but I'm talking about if there is going to be action, can it come out of a true, deep place in each one of us? Last meeting a couple weeks ago, I did begin this topic. We did talk about turning poison into medicine, and I got up to the point where I'm going to leap off today, do just a slight summarization of what we did last time, and then kind of dive into some new material. What we're going to be exploring today is the possibility of working with strong emotions from a tantric perspective. Not just being aware of emotions, not just having compassion for how we might be getting lost in them or somebody else is having a hard time, but literally transmuting emotions in the moment from something that is causing suffering to fuel for awakening. Maharaji would say things like, the best form to worship God is every form. He would say things like, I'm always in communion with you. He said, it's better to trust in God than to try to figure everything out. Can we see God in what's going on right now? That's what Tantra is about. That regardless of the content, the nature of the content is awakened energy. The nature of the content, no matter how ignorant the activity seems, no matter how upsetting or difficult the emotion might happen to me be, no matter how painful the sensations might happen to be in the body, that all of this can be used as our relationship with the divine, deepening that relationship, and thus acting from that in a way that really creates lasting change. The people in history that were able to right injustice in a very dramatic way, people like Dr. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela, Abraham Lincoln, acted from their hearts. Maharaji said when Abraham Lincoln was president, he knew that Christ was president. It's not clear that right now the president thinks that Christ is president, but that's a whole other discussion. The first step in having a foundation so that we can really be with the enlightened nature, the pure awareness energy of what it is that's going on, is we have to be here in the first place. There is of movement into this ability to have a tantric relationship with reality. So the first thing is we have to have a relationship with content, mindfulness. And I've been really emphasizing, because it's been so important in my own practice, embodied mindfulness, not just paying attention with your mind, but can you watch the news? Can you read the news? Can you look at people who are suffering and be grounded and centered? Can you stay embodied? Can you be aware of how certain inputs disembody you, and that you begin to prioritize, I'm going to be present. I'm going to be in my body. I'm going to be here. I'm going to inhabit the first, second, and third chakras. I'm going to work with the fear, the guilt, and the shame that are still part of my makeup until they're not. So, first step is being intimately with the content. The second stage then is after the mind begins to stabilize, because we're with what's going on rather than trying to fix it all the time and be lost in, oh my God, this is great or this is horrible. The mind begins to stabilize. The heart then begins to open. And we become then interested at least as much in our relationship with the content as in the content itself. Can I love what's going on? Can I have compassion for what's going on? Can I feel forgiveness? Can I feel devotion? Can I feel gratitude? Can we find those heartfelt expressions to what it is that's going on? No matter what the content, it is possible to open the heart to that. Every experience is open to a heartfelt relationship with the content itself. One of the qualities of the open heart is a spacious heart, a heart that is free of grasping, a heart that is free of clinging and condemning, a boundless heart, a heart that is big enough for all the suffering in the universe without filling up. And in that vastness of the open heart, the eye fixation that is usually right in front of our face and predominates a lot of our responses to our lives is now just one little tiny point in the vast sky of heart and mind. And God, in her infinite wisdom, now then allows true empowerment. When Maharaji says things like, I am always in communion with you, that's a tantric saying, that's a tantric statement, that not only is God in communion with you when you're praying in front of your altar or you're out in nature and you feel that ecstatic connectedness, but even in those moments where you're upset, even those moments when you're frustrated or depressed. So that now the power of the universe, the Shakti, the Chi, begins to be revealed in everything. In Hindu Tantra, as opposed to Tibetan Buddhist Tantra, it's all seen as the mother. The mother has many faces, but it's all our relationship with the mother. And are we being devoured by the mother when we're lost in, I like this, I don't like that? Or are we devouring the mother when we're seeing it all as her body, her expression? So Tantra is empowerment. It's not my power, but the power. And let's just briefly, to bring this into a little more focus, discuss the difference between conventional regular devotion and tantric devotion. In faith-based devotion, there's a sense of separation. I'm devoted to something outside of myself. There's this deity, this guru, this God that is greater than I am. And I'm worshiping that thing out there. Whereas in tantric devotion, it integrates direct experience through specific meditative, energetic practices that aim to dissolve the separation between the devotee and the deity. It's about direct experience of the divine, so that the practitioner is seeking identification with the divine rather than just worship. And it's not just emotional devotion, but there's a quality of using devotion as a tool to awaken this transformative energy, moving into sacred union. Very different kind of devotion when God is not only on the altar and up in heaven, so to speak, but in me and in you and in all the politicians and in all of the sports figures and in everybody, including all aspects of life. So Tantra, to me, is this fascinating, wonderful, exciting idea. It's what I'm working to include into the way I breathe and the way I meet people in a moment-to-moment way. But if it's only ideas, if it's only a bunch of words, then that's all it is. Tantra has to come out of an open heart. The heart is what bridges the material world and the spiritual world. First, second, and third chakras, physical world, fifth, sixth, and seventh chakras, spiritual world. The heart is the bridge. The heart is the bridge to Tantra, the fifth and sixth chakra. Tantra is, in some sense, the capacity for wonder. To feel wonder at even this experience right now, whatever it is that's going on. Is there a sense of awe, of wonder, of deep appreciation for the divine nature of even the most mundane experience? Tantra says there's no difference between the mundane and the sacred, between samsara and nirvana. So going deeply into the heart, the center of unconditional love, we can do that with certain meditative practices, mantra practices, visualizations of the deities, etc. Home of the guru, the inner guru residing in the heart. So tantric heart-centered devotion involves practices that awaken the heart chakra, deepen divine love, and dissolve the separation between self and the divine. And the core thing I want to talk about, though, today is the tantric approach to working with emotions. In the first stage of practice, Hinayana, Theravada, mindfulness, we pay attention to the emotions. What does it feel like in the body? I'm paying attention to this emotion. In the heart, Mahayana stage, we have compassion for how emotions cause suffering in myself and in other people. In tantric devotion, instead of purifying emotion through mindfulness or speeding up that process of purification through compassion, we instantaneously transmute emotions through tantric understanding, transforming emotions so that fear can be transmuted into trust and surrender, letting go into the unknown, into pure consciousness. You feel afraid. Instead of, I'm going to be aware of this, what does it feel like in my body? I'm going to have compassion because I'm afraid now. We just instantaneously, and we'll get into how to do this in a few minutes, instantaneously transmute it into surrender and trust. Anger, the raw intensity, can be transmuted into focus and power, clarity. That same energy that's anger, if we're not lost in it, if we come through the open heart, the tantric expression of anger is power, it's clarity, it's focus. Sadness can deepen our connection to the divine and to other people. we can transmute sadness instantaneously into devotion and compassion. We're sad because we're not connected to the divine. When you're connected to the divine, you're not going to be lost in sadness. We can instantaneously transmute sadness into devotion. Or if we're relating to somebody suffering, transmute it into compassion. Desire itself can be expanded from personal longing into cosmic love, transmuting desire into expansion, into bliss. Okay, so there are practices to do this. And today we will dive into how to transmute fear and how to transmute grief. But just in a more general sense, seeing emotions as energy, realizing that we can transmute them rather than have to slowly work with them, slowly purify. And then expressing emotions consciously. Usually we feel either we have to be mindful of the emotion or we repress it or we get really lost in it. Is it possible to be consciously angry, to be consciously sad? And even beyond that, then finally, as emotions, as portals into presence, true presence, emotions as portals into non-dual awareness. Instead of viewing emotions as distractions, Tantra sees them as gateways into expanded states of being. Even what we call negative emotions, when embraced without resistance, reveal these deeper layers of consciousness. So the key is to dive deeply into the emotion fully, completely, but with full awareness so that it dissolves into pure presence. Very often when we have a difficult emotion, we're lost in the story about the emotion. I'm feeling this because the politicians did that, or the weather's doing this, or the traffic's doing that, or my body's doing this. Diving into the emotion completely. And it is in the heart where the raw emotional energy is transmuted into divine love. So a tantric practitioner cultivates heart-centered awareness, allowing all emotions to arise and be absorbed into this spacious love. Emotions as energy, not as fixed states, not as a story about the trigger, what caused the emotion. Transmutation through expansion, not suppression. So let's look at two examples. The first one is witnessing fear as pure energy, working with fear, transmuting fear into trust and expansion. In Tantra, fear is not the enemy. It's a powerful energy that, when fully embraced, can lead to deep surrender, expansion, and even bliss. Fear arises when the ego resists the unknown. But Tantra teaches us to dive into fear with complete awareness, allowing it to dissolve into openness. So let's do a very short guided practice. We'll do a number of these short guided practices. Sit comfortably, lie comfortably. Settle into your body. And just remember something that you've been afraid about lately. Bring the awareness of the fear you're feeling. Bring that to awareness. What does it feel like in your body? Notice how it moves. Is there some contraction in your body? And instead of fighting or analyzing or trying to fix the fear, simply witness it with curiosity, with interest. And you can even say to yourself, this is just energy. Let me feel this completely. Being with the fear as it's expressed in the body. This is just energy. Let me feel this completely. And as you stay present, notice how it shifts. It may intensify, it may soften, it may move. But with time, the fear will dissolve into pure presence, a spacious, calm state beyond the mind. Fear thrives on resistance. When you witness it without fighting it, it loses its grip and transforms into this expansive openness. And what we did there in 60 seconds, you could do in 6 seconds. You could do it just like that. Simply witness the energy itself without resistance. This is just energy. Let me feel it completely. Okay, now we're going to do a different practice for transmuting fear. Emotional alchemy, if you will. And once again, visualize a situation that triggers your fear. And instead of avoiding it, breathe into it. With every inhalation, pull the fear into your heart center. And with every exhalation, visualize golden light expanding outward, dissolving the fear into space. Imagine the fear transforming into trust and surrender. Reversing the tendency to contract around the fear, opening the heart, transmuting the fear into love and trust. Okay, and then coming back into the room. Does anybody have any comments about either of those two practices? Yeah, please.
Thank you. I actually have a comment about the practice, but another comment, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. First of all, I haven't been here in a couple of sessions. So I'm really happy to be back to see you all and to be with you and to be with you, Dale. In terms of the practice we just did, the one where it's transmuted by sending out a golden light from the heart, bringing it to the heart and sending it out. I found that was so powerful, like 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Amazing. And it seems like a practice that can be used not just with fear, but with any of the emotions that we, call negative emotions, even though I know there aren't any. Seems like it could be used with hatred and all things. It was such a powerful visual for me. I just wanted to share an experience. It's very apropos of what you've been talking about. In the first, I'd say the first 2 weeks after the new regime came into place, I was, as someone who years of Buddhist meditation and training, and just temperamentally, I'm not really an angry person, but I was just like pissed off all the time and angry and mad and full of hate. I have to say, and again, I'm not someone who considers myself to have much hate in my heart, but I found that I did. And to the extent that I knew that this wasn't good. And I knew that I could feel my body just in a contracted state, and my patience was wearing thin in other aspects of my life. And anyway, within about 2 weeks, for the first time in my life, I got a moving violation while I was driving. I've never had a ticket before. I'm a very mindful driver. And I was listening to the news and I was angry, and I got pulled over because I went right through a stop sign. And it was like in a moment, after I, dealt with getting the ticket and so forth, and I pulled over, it was like I just had such an epiphany or just a remembrance of like what I've been practicing all these years, which is to not, first of all, to acknowledge my emotions, to acknowledge my states, but to not get so wrapped up in them. To especially, I didn't endanger anyone or myself with going through the stop sign, but I could have, and I thought, well, this could have had all sorts of consequences by allowing the strong feelings that I have for what's going on politically. And so I recognized, right away that I needed to not allow myself to have a heart full of hate. And as I started working with that, I was reminded of the three poisons in Buddhism: greed, hatred, and delusion, and recognizing that the people who I did find to be hateful, I no longer do. I still disagree with them vehemently, but I found them to be like, to my thinking, embodiments of the three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion, which is what is, in my opinion, driving much of their acts, right? And so it did allow me to feel some kind of compassion. It certainly took away the hatred. It allowed me to see them as deeply deluded, like we're all deluded, but to a deep extent. And I do have a kind of peacefulness and a kind of compassion about all the suffering, for sure, and even compassion for those deeply deluded, and still actively working to promote what I think would be a more peaceful and just and equitable world. But I'm not angry, and I'm driving carefully. And it was really a fantastic wake-up call for me, because it was like all my Buddhist training went out the window with this. It was just amazing. But I was able to recognize it and kind of revamp, I guess. So I wanted to share that experience, and also thank you for the short practices we just had. Really powerful. So thank you. Thanks, everyone.
We're going to do some more of those practices. Nicholas had your hand up.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you for these practices. This previous comment resonates with me, and if I may say something related, I feel that and I have been saying that, I guess I'm feeling it, my compassion has reached a limit. And so for me, it's not so much about compassion now, because I can't find compassion for my family members who voted for Trump. I can't find the compassion at this moment. Maybe at some point I will. When I see the suffering, like in my neighborhood last week, the police was confiscating all the fruit and produce from mostly indigenous people, taking it away. And I confronted a policeman and I said, why? He said, I have to. And he said that they were going to donate the produce. And I basically told him, shame on you. I mean, you basically one of these people and you're doing this. And what I'm trying to work with is anger. So I'm not that interested in compassion. Is how do I use anger in a positive way? I don't know, because I feel that there's value in that too. And I feel like I'm radicalizing myself more and more. And how do I work with anger so it doesn't consume me? And I use it as a positive force to create change, or to maybe not create, because I don't see myself as a creator, but to sort of foster and kindle change.
Before the presidency changed hands in January, all the seeds of anger that you were talking about, all those seeds were there in us. And there are always people in the world who are frightened, or who are acting out of ignorance, acting out of aggression, acting out of what the Buddhists call the poisons. And we have now the opportunity where things in us that we thought we had pretty much chilled out are coming to the surface. That the intensity of the hooks, the intensity of the experiences we're having is stronger, so that it's uncovering things that were not being uncovered before. And in some way, we really do have to go back to the beginning of practice, even before paying attention, and ask, what is your motivation? What do you really want? And my favorite famous quote by Suzuki Roshi, where he said, the most important thing is finding the most important thing. It's so easy to get distracted from our motivation. And you're nice and calm, you're sitting at home, and you say, the most important thing is I want to be free, I want to be a loving person, I want to have compassion for suffering in the world. But then you see something like Nicholas with the policeman and taking the food from the people of color, and on and on. It overwhelms motivation. To the extent that we're acting out of anger, to the extent we're acting unconsciously, it's unlikely that action is going to be particularly effective. I'll say something now, maybe not particularly popular, but it might be that what this country needs, what this world needs right now is exactly what's happening. Things need to fall apart before they can be put back together. If somebody else would have been elected president, to me, the country was going in a slow decline, wrong direction in a lot of ways. And in the 12-step programs, healing doesn't happen in the first step until you admit you're out of control. You need help. We're not at that place yet collectively as a country. There's an illness. Clearly, there's going to be a lot of suffering. Clearly, we don't know how long that's going to happen or how many people it's going to hurt. My interest is what you and I can do to awaken ourselves and be forces for love and compassion and social justice in the world. I live in California, in Marin County, I have a very privileged existence. I know that, but I feel that given this group with 1,300 people in it, and podcasts, and I have the Living Dying Project, my little piece is trying to be as present and loving and compassionate as I can, and ask, is there something I can do on a larger stage? I don't know. And once again, I mean, I hope there are even Republicans in our meeting here today, people that did vote for Trump. And I really pray that Nicholas can begin to feel compassion for people who did that. There's some very kind-hearted, good, well-intentioned people that voted for Donald Trump. There are. Once again, I don't want to get too political here, but the point that I'm trying to make is that there are stronger emotions flying around now than there have been for a long time in our country, maybe since back in the 60s and 70s, when the police were chasing me down the street, shooting tear gas at me because of Vietnam War protests. What are we going to do with these stronger emotions? Are we going to be overwhelmed by them? Are we going to pretend they're not there and turn off the news and turn on Netflix and try to avoid the whole thing? What are we going to do with what's going on now? I have some more practices to do about grief. We worked with fear, but let's have two more questions, John and then Gary, and then I'll talk a little bit more and then we'll have a break.
Yeah, hi, Dale. Hi, everyone. Regarding the first, the word that comes to mind is technique that you were talking to us about, Dale. Becoming aware of the particular emotion that we're feeling and kind of following it into the body and being present with it there. what I think you're talking about, and what I have been taught before to do in that regard, is to see the emotion as a two-sided thing. The fear, we could call it fear, that word, whatever that concept, but then it also seems to have the other side of that coin, so to speak, is physical sensation. And so going into my body, I do locate, okay, where is this fear in my body right now? And notice what the sensation is and the location, and be present with it. Not try to make it wrong or bad, not try to make it go away, or even change it in any way, just simply to be present with it, to be with it. And I imagine that that's what you're talking about, and I'm wondering, is that what you're talking about?
It might be slightly different in the sense that it might begin with what you're talking about of just being aware of it. But then, because of doing this from the heart, tantric practices are heart-centric practices. One can be aware of fear in a Vipassana sense. Here's what it feels like. But we were talking about, and I maybe didn't set it up enough with enough preamble to go into your heart and really feel the fear-based sensations from your heart. But to the extent you're doing that, there's a much better chance then that it dissolves into presence. We're using the sensations of the emotion in this particular technique as the portal to experience pure presence. It's not just being aware of, here's what fear feels like in the body. It's, I'm feeling the fear, my heart is open, I'm going into the fear deeply enough that it's experienced as pure presence, as pure awareness, as awake energy, as a form of the Divine Mother. Like Maharaji says, I'm always in communion with you, or the best form to worship God is every form, even the form of fear, we're worshiping God. There's a heart-based foundation to the whole thing. We're grounded and centered. From a Vipassana standpoint, there's a embodied mindfulness, and then that's supporting a wide open heart. And then we go into these emotions. Studies have shown, quote unquote, studies have shown, and I don't have the references, but there is some obvious studies, probably some of these guys at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, that mindfulness practices lead to greater well-being, that you're slowly transforming difficult emotions into greater well-being through mindfulness. And then some further studies showed that if you add compassion, now there's two things to do. You're being mindful and compassionate. The transformation into well-being is speeded up. And then right before the pandemic, some researchers, I believe it was at the University of Leeds in England, showed that if you brought in heart-based emptiness practice, tantric practice, that it greatly speeded up the movement into well-being even further. It isn't just mindfulness we're talking about. It's mindfulness from the heart that instead of gradually wearing away our resistance to the emotion, or a little more quickly wearing it away because we're adding compassion, we can instantaneously transmute it because our heart is so open. And there's like a sense of even worship or communion, that even this emotion is an expression of the divine. It's kind of our love affair, even this.
So again, I'm having to figure out, okay, so am I really understanding what you're saying here? And what I think I'm hearing is, in going beyond experiencing, say, the fear or the anger, whatever it is, as physical sensation and being present with it in my body, I'm, in a sense, kind of going through that into, as you say, presence, which for me is what I call aware emptiness.
Yeah. Yes.
So for me, if I do that, I mean, what's easiest for me actually is to do exactly that. Not that I could stay there for more than a second or two, but to go into that state of aware emptiness. What I find really difficult, and what I think you're also talking about, is not attempting to stay in that space of aware emptiness, of pure present, pure consciousness, but to kind of do a tightrope act in terms of being aware of myself as that at the same time as being aware of the emotion, of the sensation. So I'm kind of doing a dual awareness sort of thing, and I think that that's what I'm hearing you say in terms of that would be the best way to live life in general. To as much as we could do that, that's the goal. That's the wonderful place, the sweet spot. So am I getting that right, or what?
Yeah, I don't. I got a little lost there toward the end. I had some sense that maybe you're a little bit overthinking it.
That could be.
I'm not sure there. I mean, I don't know. It's doing two things. To me, it doesn't feel like a tightrope. To me, it feels more like just an expansion. Instead of me focusing on the emotion, I go into the emotion, and then it reveals the expansive nature of reality. That the nature of the heart is boundless. Tantra is done from the heart center, supporting then the fifth and sixth chakras. So what I would encourage is, instead of trying to figure it out, just do some of these practices, go into your heart and work with emotions, as opposed to just being aware of them, and see if there's expansion, or if you're walking a tightrope, or if you're climbing out of a ditch, or whatever metaphor is going on there. Who knows what it is, right? In one way, you could say the essence of Tantra is to touch and be touched. Now, you could say that mindfulness is touching the emotion, right? But in Tantra, we're touching it in a different way. You're really being touched by the emotion. Your heart is open. It's not just that you're feeling fear, but that fear is an expression of the divine. Another practice that we didn't do, there's a deity in Hinduism, Durga, a wrathful female deity who is the destroyer of fear. And she has a mantra, D-U-M, dum. It's actually pronounced doom, which is maybe kind of appropriate. It's pronounced like D-O-O-M. One practice for transmuting fear is to loudly say doom 21 times or 108 times, or even just once, just cutting through it, so that it's not just being aware of the fear, realizing that this is your relationship with Durga. This is your relationship with the divine. There's a whole other heartfelt, expansive, being touched in a very intimate way, quality to the whole thing. So that I know a lot. In fact, my very first remarks today were, I know a lot of people who've done a lot of Vipassana practice, a lot of mindfulness practice. Even Claire suggested that she was overwhelmed by what's going on now, trying to just be aware of it. And the point of the talk today is there is stronger medicine needed for these stronger emotions now. So that Claire got the shock of getting a ticket. Maybe that's an expensive lesson. Maybe it's cheap at that price. Who knows about Claire's pocketbook particularly. But instead of the policeman pulling you over, I'm pulling you over and say, hey, there's another way to deal with this stuff. Instead of just trying to pay attention to and watch being overwhelmed, that even this is sacred, even this whole mess, even people being deported and people being hungry and people being fired. I get it. People are suffering. Before Trump became president, there were so many children starving to death on this planet. There were so many people being sexually trafficked and raped and abused that we weren't paying attention to because it wasn't right in our face. Now it's happening in Nicholas's neighborhood. We need stronger medicine to deal with the overwhelm. Here's a way to do it. Let's hear from Gary, and then we'll do another practice or two, and then we'll take a little break.
Thanks, Dale. A couple of things I wanted to mention. I think the first thing is that the most striking aspect of this approach, this practice, is that it completely bypasses analysis. I think that's partly why it's so effective. Is instant transformation.
Yeah.
But I've been finding, I'm kind of experimenting a little bit with sort of superimposing amazement, even astonishment at the recognition of these strong emotions, being afraid, being angry, in the way that Claire described it, And I think there's a suggestion that by doing that, we actually are changing our brain chemistry. I haven't been able to find the specific references to it, but I've heard it mentioned by spiritual teachers. So I'm curious. But it feels to me like being amazed at, dropping into the emotion with amazement somehow facilitates a movement. So the question I have, though, is that if I had a concern about bypassing, what would I want to notice in that process? What would be appearing that might tip me off that maybe I'm bypassing?
The title for this talk is Capacity for Wonder, which is exactly what you're talking about. And whether we call it wonder or amazement or awe, those are the qualities that arise naturally when we have this tantric relationship with emotion. So that right now, just as a very brief example, everybody here, just look around the room, look at something, and look at it as if you'd never seen it before. You're seeing it for the first time with a look of amazement. And just rest in that amazement. In a way, one of the main practices of Tantra is living your life as if you're seeing things for the first time. The metaphor I feel is like I'm surfing time. I'm right on this wave on the edge of time. I'm just moving through time. And then all of a sudden I lose amazement. I fall off the surfboard. I'm lost in the concepts of the ocean of concepts. I've got to climb back on the board. I've got to paddle back out, find another wave. And hopefully that only takes a second or two. But the point is that one of the practices that can be talked about in two ways, seeing everything as if for the first time or experiencing everything as grace. And there's this wonderful poem by St. John of the Cross where somebody asks God, what is grace? And God replies, everything is grace. But when I see the perplexity on your face when I say that, could not lovers feel that every moment in their lover's arms is grace. Existence is my arms, says God. Existence is my arms. Existence is grace. And though I know that you're not going to get this until the heart is really open, this whole discussion about Tantra, if it's an intellectual discussion without the grace, without the wonder, amazement. In fact, there's a book which is a translation of this ancient tantric test called Wonder, Awe, and Astonishment, or something like that. It's all these small little practices of seeing something completely and resting in the amazement, staying in the state of amazement. And that includes turning on the news. Not just, you're seeing the news for the first time. It's the human condition. It's like, yes, and they're suffering, but are we being overwhelmed by the suffering or not? In no way is this spiritual bypassing. That resting in this tantric place will unleash the power to create change. It's not that we're doing it in place of action. Activism that it was coming out of deep caring for the poor, for connection with God, for this like tantric relationship with God. And it, to me, that it's different than just pure, natural, pure, bare mindfulness. Now, clearly, mindfulness eventually will morph into this open-heartedness. There was a wonderful teacher in India called Deepa Ma that many of my friends went to see, a highly, highly evolved, very awake Vipassana teacher. And she said that for her, mindfulness and love were the same thing. How could she be mindful of something and not love it? How could she love something and be not mindful of it? They're exactly the same thing. But for most of us, there's a difference, right? And Tantra is beginning to make that bridge. That's a great point, Gary. And although I'm not sure, the one thing you said that kind of confused me a bit is that you find the amazement and then you put it on your experience. To me, it's more you go into the experience and amazement arises. The amazement is the expression of touching the divine in each moment. So we could do those same kinds of practices with other emotions, as Claire pointed out. But let's briefly do two practices to transmute grief into devotion and compassion. And once again, just settle into your body. And breathe into your heart a few times. And ask yourself, is there something that you feel grief about? Something immediate, something long-standing? We're all grieving. We've all lost a lot. And instead of intellectualizing this story or resisting it, allow yourself to feel grief in your body. Where is it in your body? Is it in the chest? Is it in the throat? And instead of pushing it away or trying to fix it, breathe into it. Observe it as pure energy. Repeating to yourself, this too is divine. And let any emotions arise without judgment, heaviness, longing, sadness. Or we're transmuting grief from personal suffering into an interpersonal flow of energy. And then moving directly to a second practice here for grief. Feeling grief, bring your attention into your heart and visualize there's a golden light in your chest that gently expands with each breath. With each inhalation, you breathe in acceptance of what you're feeling. And with each out breath, you release any clinging to the grief into pure light. Any emotions that might arise, let them just move through you, not holding on. It's the golden light in your chest, breathing in acceptance, breathing out, releasing pain into expansiveness. And you can put your hand on your heart and say, I embrace this grief as love itself. We're allowing grief to transform into a deeper love rather than to stagnate into sorrow or sadness. And then coming back to this golden light in the center of your chest, and just imagine how much grief there is in the world. How many people are grieving? How many people feel disconnected? Grief are the difficult emotions that arise in response to feeling separate. So many people are frightened. So many people are angry, lost in grief because of the stories unfolding in their lives. Can we breathe into our chest acceptance of the human condition and breathe out, releasing all this pain into light, into spaciousness? That you're willing, trusting the boundlessness of your own heart to be with all of that grief and release it into wholeness. You're letting it pass through you, not holding on, not pushing away, not fixing. Then once again, you can say to yourself, I embrace this grief as love itself, as pure energy, pure awakened energy. And in this spaciousness, then, can you begin to experience that any emotion that arises, any thought, any sensation that arises is awakened energy, that you're willing to touch it intimately, be touched by it. That each arising is an expression of the divine, of the mother who protects and teaches. Beyond positive and negative, beyond sacred and profane. the most simple experience, the sensations that arise as you're breathing, a thought about something totally not important, a sensation in your body can be received with wonder. Just to be alive, just to be awake in this moment. Together. In this spacious heart naturally arises compassion for all beings. Naturally arises the wish that all beings might be free from suffering, might be able to increase their capacity for wonder, to surrender into this spacious wholeness. Compassion for ourselves with the wish that we might be warriors of compassion, moving into the world, working with our fear in a moment-to-moment way. Coming back into your body, grounded and centered. And now comes the fun part, post-meditation, integrating all the wonderful love we have shared into the rest of our day. Thank you so much.